All right. Good morning, Doug. You have your two of your furry friends here with us today. You want to introduce them to folks?
Yes, I think I should actually. We've had some discord in the family because I feel that our movie star, her name is Honey, but I call her Nudgerella because she nudges in on you all the time. I feel that she's a supporter of the Ukrainians,
Oh,
whereas Mama Poodle, who's her sister, but about 10 pounds heavier, is more of a babushka, and therefore she kind of supports the Russians. So a little discord here between the girls. Also, Oscar, who's our main battle poodle. If things ever get serious, I think you can see him. Can you see him over there?
yep. It's camped on
Yeah,
this on the chair.
on the chair, right? Uh, yes, he's strong like bull, smart like refrigerator. So I think
He's kind of intimidating though. He really is.
yeah, he is. He's my main battle poodle. So he he likes both sides, which because that's an adequate description of both sides. Strong like bull, smart like refrigerator. Anyway, feeling a little bit jealous of Jeff Berwick with Lucy. I felt like I really should introduce my dogs too. I don't want Jeff to pull a march on us.
All right. Well, great. And you've had a
All
lot
right.
of great poodles over the years.
Yeah, so now we'll go from the sublime, which is the dogs, to the ridiculous, which is the world situation.
Right. So let's start with the commodity markets because what's happening now is I haven't seen anything like this. I don't know ever, but I'm sure you have. Can you just give it some what's happening and give it some context or perspective?
Well, wheat has been limit up for a couple of days. I think wheat is now at close to all-time highs. I don't know. I have to look at a very long-term chart, but even in real terms, I think it's at an all-time high. Of course, soybeans are about the same, moving into an all-time high area. Corn, same thing. And this is very problematical because the poor people around the world eat these things, and the rich people feed them to their animals. So this has all got all kinds of knock-on effects. Corn gets too expensive. Uh, Feedlots can't really afford to feed the animals and make any money, especially when cattle prices are going down, because there's a lot of pressure from inflation put on the average guy who thinks, God, I can't afford to pay $20 for a steak. So there's a lot of distortions that are being created and simultaneously unwound in different places in the market, like palladium closing in on $3,000. Why? Because it's
Wow.
mainly from Russia. Platinum, however, which is usually sold at a premium in the past, is going for about 1,000. But they're going to have problems in the platinum market too, because most of it comes from South Africa, and it's a very unstable place for the long term. So of course, oil, $110 or whatever, bouncing around. What's the average guy going to do? Gasoline at I think it's probably close to an all-time high again. So what's the average guy going to do when it costs him $100 or $120 to fill his pick 'em up truck?
Yep. Exactly. And I mean, and you talked about stuff with the Arab Spring before, but let me just show you this little chart real quick that shows the top importers of wheat from Russia and Ukraine. Number one is Egypt.
Hmm.
And that Egypt is not exactly the most stable country on earth anyway. And you can
No.
imagine whether or not they're even going to be able to get the wheat from Russia and Ukraine in the coming season is going to be a question.
Well, that is a good question actually. And then how are they going to pay for it? Because presumably they paid for it with dollars going through the Swift system. So if that's not possible, then what are they going to do for their wheat? You know,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
the natives might get restless and riot and other regime change someplace in the Middle East. So you just don't know what the knock-on effects of this are. And once again, I blame most of the problems here on the Americans, since they, you know, overthrew the popularly elected government back in 2014. And of course, the guy that was the Russian puppet at the time he was a scumbag. But is Zelensky any better? I mean, perhaps you've heard that, I've heard, who knows what the facts are, that Zelensky has $1 billion credited to his account in banks, mostly in Central America. And this is more verifiable, but is it really true? I'm not sure. He has a house in Miami worth $35 million. Have you heard that?
I haven't heard that, but I wouldn't put, all these countries, especially the more fringe they are, the more corrupt the leadership tends to be. So, nothing like that would surprise me at all. I can't imagine, you know, he's certainly not the hero he's being made out to be in the media, which is actually, it's pretty shocking. They have all these pictures of him and, looking in these battle poses, wearing his body armor and his Kevlar helmet and stuff, and it's all, and he's like a little tiny guy too. So, he's like has to be like a Tom Cruise like photo shoot, where the photographer's getting real low, so he gets this power angle from, because otherwise he just looks like a tiny little man. But he's made out to be this huge hero, standing up. And actually, I don't think one country invading another country ever is good, right? But ultimately, I think these governments are just attacking the populations and everywhere. That's just what they do. And by encouraging the things he's doing are just, they're just going to result in way more death and destruction in Ukraine than there would have to be. Bringing in, they have something like 16 or 18,000 foreign fighters who've shown up, basically just randoms who have been young men who've been bored, now going there thinking that they're doing the right thing, fighting, but with no training whatsoever. They're just going to get destroyed.
The Americans would call them, what kind of combatants did we round up all these people and put them in Guantanamo? They were called, what kind of combatants? They had a term for it. Unlawful.
Yeah, they'd call them unlawful combatants. Yeah,
exactly. So that's exactly who, guys that are looking for an adventure, going to fight the Russians are doing. And then, of course, you hear that, and apparently it's a fact, that Zelensky is passing out thousands and thousands of AK-47s to just miscellaneous people. And there's every reason to believe that the miscellaneous people that are taking advantage of these things are basically criminal gangs that are using them to intimidate the locals. And another law they've got recently put into effect is that if you're a male between 18 and 65, you can't leave the country. Gee, that makes Ukraine sound like a free country.
Exactly.
So the whole thing is, well, listen, just last night, I went out to dinner with a couple of Argentine friends that they're well-to-do and sophisticated. But the wife of the couple quickly showed me her cell phone. It was in Spanish, about Russians capture and plan to blow up the largest nuclear facility in Europe. And I said, Tatana, that's ridiculous. That's the opposite of what the Russians would want to do. If anything goes wrong there, it's a drunk Russian soldier that accidentally lights off a grenade in an office in the building. But that's crazy. And she insisted that the Russians were going to create another Chernobyl, as did the website that she showed me, which was in Spanish. They're going to create another, it's a hysteria there where Putin is crazy. She also said, it's clear that he's insane, he's crazy, he should be they should assassinate him. And this stuff is going out everywhere now.
Everywhere. It's like, the last 5 years, I think, had been priming the population for this. So we had the whole Russian hysteria with the Trump stuff, the Trump Russiagate or whatever. So priming half the population to already hate Russia, to like deeply think that he was evil and unhinged from the very beginning. And so that's been there, even though that was all disproven, but that's been there. And then, and then you have like this pushing people into tribes with like the Black Lives Matter thing. Like, so this to me is exactly the same, feels like the same sort of thing in one way. Like, you had to come out and say which side you were on or people would, or you would be ostracized. Really, I mean, you had to come out and say what side you're on. And you see people like you saw corporations falling over themselves to donate money to BLM, to send out issue press releases and all that. You see almost every organization, I mean, actually every organization on earth doing the same thing right now, condemn the Russians. And it's incredible. And it's, people are not using their brains. I mean, my thinking and the whole reason behind that, the stuff they were saying about that nuke plant is if they could make the argument that he's so unhinged, so crazy that he's going to cause this disaster, then it would force NATO's hand to either, to put troops in there or start a no-fly zone, which basically just guarantees World War III. I mean, totally guarantees it. So there's no upside to Putin, by the way, for attacking a nuke plant, but there's huge upside for some of those, some of the more radical nationalists in Ukraine to like make people think that that's what he wants to do. But it's crazy.
No, you're absolutely right. And as much as I love Tatana, of course, she was not only double masked early on during the COVID hysteria, but flew up to Miami to get a Pfizer shot. As soon as
she wouldn't have to wait. Yeah.
Right. So it's a certain personality type. Can be very nice people, but they're prone to hysteria and things get really bad, perhaps even psychosis. Anyway,
yeah, it seems like it. So everyone and their brother has basically been lining up against Russia here, and people think that it's to get Russia. And they did a couple of things I thought were pretty astonishing. One is that they, the paraplegics that were participating in the Beijing Olympics were kicked out. The Russian handicapped people were kicked out of participation in the Beijing Olympics. That's pretty crazy.
It's crazy. It's worse than whichever Iraq war was, where you couldn't eat French fries anymore. You had to eat freedom fries.
Freedom fries. Well, because the French were against our invasion that time around. Yeah.
So it's easy to whip the chimpanzees up into a frenzy of hate.
Yeah,
no matter what.
But it's so self-destructive. Let me show you one more thing here real quick, and then we can get into these questions. But here we go. So the state of Kentucky's teachers' retirement system was the second largest shareholder and spare bank of Russia.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, because it's probably paid a good dividend. It was probably great value, and because of our, just all of the full spectrum attack economically on the Russian people, I would say, basically has wiped out the value of their holding in that, and what is that? So basically they lost, about almost $13 million.
Yeah, right.
Of retirement funds for teachers in Kentucky. So we really got Putin that time. That was a good one. We sure got Putin.
Of course, I have little sympathy for teachers in America who are almost all members of the union,
or these dumb pension funds, for that matter. Honestly.
Yeah, exactly. But listen, there was another thing that I saw that Russians who are exhibiting cats in the cat shows. I mean, I know nothing about this, but they've been evicted from the premises because you're Russian. You can't show your cat.
No. If the cat was born or bred in Russia, is what it was. So if it's a Russian origin cat.
This is so bizarre, but it seems like it might still get worse at this point.
How can it not get worse, Doug? I mean, it's escalation all around.
Look, we got a border dispute between two countries, neither one of which are idols of freedom, and it's been blown up into. Listen, I'll give you a good analogy for all this. It's that Lugansk and Donetsk, I'm not even pronouncing them right at this point. This shows how have been semi-independent countries for the last 8 years. And Americans have forgotten all about the fact that when Kosovo split off, a province of Serbia, split off from Serbia, and the same thing happened. Serbia was acting the way Ukraine is acting towards those two. Well, we bombed the hell out of Serbia and killed tens of thousands of people. That was fine. But when it happens with two similar provinces with the Ukraine, not fine. It's insane.
I really think people don't have any clue of history, though. I mean, because that was in the early '90s, so a lot of people weren't alive then at all.
Not even history; it's current events.
It should be. It should be, but no one knows anything.
No, nobody can pick any of these countries out on the map, but they all got really strong opinions on them. And
but also, I think that one of the, and maybe all countries are like this, but people tend to think that they're the good guys. So when we invade countries, we blow stuff up, and we anybody who might go out there and say this is these are war crimes, all of that, we just get dismissed out of hand. But again, people are falling over themselves trying to declare everything that's happening in Ukraine as war crimes. Now, listen, war is a crime as far as I'm concerned. It's disgusting in every way. But people have no sense of the deep hypocrisy that they carry about themselves. They look at what we did in the Middle East for the last 20 years, and then they go, oh no, Russia is the evil empire here. I mean, there's a lot of evil to go around.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that Nuji, who's the prettiest of the two sisters, and who wants to be a movie star. And the reason that she's supporting Ukraine is that it's easier to make big money hanging out in Ukrainian bars than Russian bars at this point. So that's another reason why she supports the Ukrainians.
That makes sense. It's a rational choice. All right. Well, let's get into some of these questions from. I want to follow up real quick on the commodities market. Do you think that we're this chaotic period? I mean, how do you imagine this resolves itself? Do you think this is just a fear spike that's just driving up the uncertainties causing it now, or is there real underlying problems?
Well, as I've said before, the way I like to play all markets is I like to buy them when they really seem like commodities, let's say, to start with, when they're selling at or significantly below the cost of production, okay? Right now, all these commodities are selling way above the cost of production in the US. So, I mean, I don't know that wheat and corn can double from here. I don't know that oil could double from here. It might, but the good thing about it right now is that if you're selling options, the volatility is so high that you can get huge premiums selling options, short-term options. I mean, even on the S&P in the US. And incidentally, going back to the last thing that I recommended, it's Moderna, selling naked calls on that. I continue to do that. And in gigantic premiums, it's been very profitable, and I hope I can keep selling calls.
What's that? What's it at now? Do you know
I haven't even checked this morning. Okay. It's probably about 140, but the last thing I looked, I could sell a $150 call for about $9. So $10 out of the money, 2 weeks to run. Stock has got to go from 140 to 159 before I lose money. If it stays where it is or goes, I capture all the premiums.
That's amazing. Those premiums are still that large.
Yes, it is. It is. Well, I just saw an article someplace like on Alpha. What is it?
Seeking Alpha. Seeking Alpha.
Seeking Alpha, right. Where the guy is saying that these mRNA vaccines are a major breakthrough, and Moderna is going to go to the moon, all this type of thing. Well,
or zero.
But I don't think so.
Yeah. Jeez.
That's what makes a market. It wouldn't do it. We all like chocolate.
That's true. That's true. So basically, you think that everything is overpriced right now, but that doesn't.
Everything's overpriced. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything's overpriced.
But you see things like there's if for instance if what continues to happen in Ukraine goes on any longer at all, like they're not going to get the corn planted for the season. I mean, that's got to get planted in 30 to 60 days. They could easily miss the entire season.
And if they get it planted, they may not be able to have it transported to any place where it's needed.
Right.
So, and even if they can do that, maybe the buyers will be denied the facility to pay with dollars because SWIFT is cut off to these people. So it's, it looks pretty serious. As high as they are, these commodities could go higher and establish themselves at a new level a lot faster than wages are going to go up for the average working Joe. So,
Right. In fact,
why,
I did
why
see
is
it.
North Africa and other places in the third world coming? Yeah, good chance, real good chance.
All right, let's get into some of these questions. For our viewers, if you have questions for Doug, the best thing to do is to join our Telegram group. There's a description. In the description, there's a link to that group. Each week, in advance of the call, I request questions from people. They get into the spreadsheet, and we get through as many as we can. So if you want to ask questions, that's the best way to do it. Okay. So first question, we've had this one before, but not in a while. Someone asked if we've read The Sovereign Individual, and if so, if we'd share our thoughts on it.
Well, you know, I know the main author on that, known the main author on that, James L. Davidson, for 40 years. And frankly, we've never gotten along for all kinds of reasons. So my opinion on the book is going to be tainted by my opinion about James. But I'm told that it's an intelligent book.
Yes. Okay. Well, we'll leave it there. Okay, let's see. Two questions from this next viewer. He says, number one, would you testify on the grand jury series by Rainer Fulmick? And number two, I took a position of 50K in Lukoil on LSE at the price of the annual dividend, $6. Do you think the shares will rebound? If the answer is yes, then to which price level by when? I know you don't do those kinds of predictions, but that's the question. So first of all, about the grand jury from Rainer Fulmick. You know anything about that?
Not familiar with it, so I can't comment. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, he's an attorney who basically was responsible for prosecuting, I believe, Volkswagen for misstating its emission standards. It's basically like who's that American consumer protection lawyer that's was very famous. I can't think of his name.
Well, you're not talking about Ralph Nader, but you're talking.
I was talking about Ralph Nader actually. This guy's kind of seems to have the same sort of reputation in Europe, actually. So anyway, so he basically has been collecting a bunch of information. They're doing this sort of mock grand jury, trying to demonstrate, the case against COVID and the vaccines and all that stuff. And it's it's not a real grand jury or anything. It's basically just a procedure they're doing online, but it's interesting, but it doesn't have any legal basis at all.
Yeah, personally, I don't have any opinion on what his views or whatever. Yeah. I can't say anything really.
And you can't testify in a grand jury unless you're a fact witness.
Well, the way I feel about these things mostly is pox on all their houses. I mean, frankly, when Volkswagen got tagged for fudging its emissions, well, we shouldn't have emissions things.
It's true.
There's a whole technological argument that I could make that the emissions controls on cars waste much more fuel and are worse for the environment than having the emissions controls on them. So that was bad having them. And should Volkswagen have lied? Well, I don't know. The emissions controls were stupid. But you can't like any of these corporations because they're all woke these days. The hell with them all, frankly.
I agree. So what do you think about Lukoil?
I'd be a buyer if I could be, but you've got to find a broker and an exchange that'll let you buy it. But yeah, I'm willing to take that bet right now. I wouldn't bet my whole or a substantial part of my portfolio on it, but yeah, I'll buy it. I think there's a good chance this is all going to blow over and things will kind of normalize, enough that, so I do it if you can. Yeah, sure.
And there, we watched.
No real skull, all of them, frankly.
Well, I watched an interview with Rick Rule where he was saying, there's a risk that these things may not be tradable for a period of time. And that's just part of the risk. And if you're willing to take on that risk, then, it makes sense. But it's quite possible. It could be a year or two. They could be delisted and then get relisted in the future. It's hard to say with what's happening now.
Exactly. And Rick, that was the best interview that Rick ever gave, quite frankly. And one of the reasons I liked it is that he emphasized the difference between price and value. And of course, in a Buffett-like way, it doesn't matter if the thing is trading or not, as long as that's just a weighing machine. You don't care about a voting machine as opposed to a weighing machine. Anyway, Rick is quite correct on that. And if I could, I would, but I won't because I can't, I don't think.
Right. No, they removed it from.
Nobody can really at this point.
Nope. Okay, so there's a chance for a World War III. Do you think there's a chance for a World War III? If yes, who do you think would win and how would it end?
Well, who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? And what's China going to do in World War III? Because they say that the Russians and the Americans, who are the main players, of course, in this, have roughly equal numbers of nuclear missiles. So are they going to each try their best 6,000 nuclear bombs apiece, and missiles to planes to deliver them? God, that would really be a mess. That would be genuinely dystopian. Who's going to win? Nobody could possibly win.
Do you think you could have a World War III that doesn't involve total nuclear?
Yes, I've been saying for some time that World War III nuclear weapons will obviously play a part in the war, but the main part of World War III, which will arrive, is going to be biological. There's all kinds of advantages to biological warfare just by itself. I mean, it can be, you can develop, I'm sure, bacteria and viruses that just attack certain genotypes, like for Chinese. So that you want to attack China? Well, you develop a virus that just attacks people that are of that easily identifiable. Only the bad guys die. A few of your own Chinese die, but you know, these are called
I don't know why I'm not. My vocabulary sucks today. I can't think of these words.
I know.
For them.
Friendly fire. It's kind of like friendly fire, or whatever the word is for that.
Collateral damage. Collateral damage.
Collateral damage, exactly. So biological war is inevitable for all kinds of reasons. It's better than a neutron bomb because it leaves the buildings up there and it basically only kills the bad guys. Of course, it's a two-way street because that game can be played. That's a double-edged sword. Number one, and number two, cyber war. Since the whole world runs on computers today, everything, the utilities, the financial system, communications, everything. So you wipe out the computers and basically you're going to destroy civilization at this point. So nuclear weapons will be an element, but I think they're going to come in number three. But, you know, considering that all the people that run governments are sociopaths and a lot of them are active psychopaths, yeah, why should wars stop now, especially with these two new weapons?
Yeah, well, so one aspect of cyber warfare doesn't necessarily have to be the disabling of computer networks. It could be the control and manipulation of the information on those computer networks for an information war. You know, I think that's a part of it that's probably, it's a lot more subtle than any of the others. And I think that it's, and if you think of it that way, then I think there's a fair argument that you could say World War III actually started in 2020. We've had a biological component to it, and there's been the electronic component to it, and it's turning into kinetic at this point, and who knows where it goes from here. Could get into much more violent forms of biological and cyber.
Exactly, and as Napoleon said, in warfare, the psychological is to the physical as 3 is to 1. So psychological warfare, which is what you're talking about, much more important actually. Oh yeah, that's gonna be a big element, no question.
Yeah. Okay. Someone asks what the progress is on your next book, Terrorist, and when you expect it to be released.
Slow, and unfortunately events are accelerating so that I feel like I'm writing current events as opposed to predictive history. But I promise that by the time we get to number 7, called Apocalypse, that will be in the realm of science fiction. We want to stay ahead of the apocalypse anyway.
I hope so.
I don't know. When are we going to get that book out? I hope it's written by the end of the year, but I've got my fingers crossed. There's so much stuff that's happening these days. I don't even have time to amuse myself, which is what writing a novel is all about to me. Don't need the money, actually.
No, you don't need aggravation either. So if it's not entertaining,
Well, and I might get on to a new version of the church's banned books list, which is uncomfortable if you're that kind of author.
yes.
We're like,
Well, it does seem like there's a whole new level of blacklisting and censorship, and that's occurring, and it's much more effective than the stuff in the past because it includes this economic element. From the Canadian truckers, people who supported them with small donations, to now totally dislodging 140 some million people from the global financial system. Not just Putin and the other oligarchs. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
well, listen, talking about that, I understand that at least two mega yachts belonging to so-called oligarchs have been confiscated, one by the Germans, and I forget where the other one is. And of course, I'm sure these oligarchs are basically thugs, but all right, because they're thugs, that's not a reason to steal their property just because they are friends of Putin. What's going on here? What happened to the rule of law where you have to actually commit a crime to have your property? Just take, hey, you're a friend of Putin, we're going to grab it. This is insane. I mean, it's setting a precedent throughout the West, where the West is no better than its enemies.
That's right, but I think this has been building for quite a while. I mean, these public examples with the oligarchs, those are people. A lot of people probably like it in some way. They see, oh, a bad guy getting, so what? He gets this huge yacht taken care of, he'll be fine. But like, you see it on a person who donated $25 to the truckers when there was nothing wrong with it. They like, no one even said it was a problem. No one said it was an illegal protest at that point, and still they had all their assets frozen. So
Well, and perhaps the genesis of that even is the fact that for decades now, if the police stop you and they think you have too much cash or whatever reason they want to fabricate, I mean, the amount that's stolen in actual criminal thefts by criminals is a lot less than the amount confiscated by the police now. I mean, it's out of control.
yeah, it's
So
called civil asset forfeiture.
asset, yes, exactly. Now we definitely need a great reset in the West, but it's going to be, I'm afraid, Klaus Schwab's idea of a reset, not our idea of a reset.
Unfortunately, I think that's true. Yeah, if you want to really you want to see how, if you're still on the back the blue side of things, I would encourage you to go do a little digging, spend 30 minutes reading about civil asset forfeiture in the U.S. and you'll see how unconscionable really what has been happening there for years and years is, and with total stripping of rights altogether. I mean, it's actually unbelievable that it's legal to do that.
It is, and actually, the stupid party is just as dangerous, in some ways, even more dangerous than the evil party in the United States.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Okay. Let's see. Russian money supply expanded at a rate of 5.7 times since 2007, while their gold holdings expanded at roughly the same rate, 5.7 times. Consequently, it appears Russia is operating on a de facto gold standard. If the Russians formally announce that the ruble is on a gold standard, what kind of impact would that have on the global monetary system?
Well, I don't know about the accuracy of that first figure, the 5.7, maybe it's right, but I think that the Russians and the Chinese are both going to go to a de facto gold standard, just because the Russians, and maybe the Chinese are next for a number of reasons, are cut out of SWIFT. They don't want to use the dollar. I mean, it's insane for them to use the currency of their adversary, and nobody trusts their currencies. So yeah, I think we could actually go back to gold. This is a good argument for much higher gold prices and the daily utility of gold, frankly.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it definitely shows that they've been managing their national balance sheet a lot better than the U.S. has. That's for sure.
Oh, God, that's not hard to do.
No, it isn't. Okay, next question. It says, how do I deal with parents that are stuck in war in northern Ukraine? The city that they live in is heavily bombed. There's no way for them to escape. I have close to zero influence on that, but Stoicism teaches us to only worry about what you can control. How do I get them out?
Well, I wonder if that's true about the city being heavily bombed, because everything that I've heard, and of course I'm not on the ground, is that the Russians are going out of their way to tiptoe around damaging civilian assets and all that. But leaving that aside, what do you do? I don't know. How do you get out? Well, they can, northern Ukraine, I guess they can get into Belarus or Poland, can't they? I mean, it's not like the border is shut down, is it?
It's not.
Unless
It's
you
not.
mail in between 18 and 65.
I mean, I do, from what I understand, there are, they basically have declared martial law in these cities. So there's basically curfews. There's periods of time where people cannot be out of the house. But I don't know about specific cities, but there are people there, I am certain, who, if they want to get out of there, that if you have resources, financial resources, there are people that will go and get them and help them get out. I mean, there are always those kinds of people in places like this. So,
but maybe this is a bad time to panic, quite frankly, because the way I read it, the Russians aren't going to create mass devastation of any type at all in Ukraine. So you're going to be inconvenienced in a lot of ways, but that might be better than putting your possessions in a wheelbarrow and acting like a refugee. Refugees,
never,
you don't want to live
doesn't
like
work out well.
Exactly.
No, and the other thing is that there are some cities where, as I understand it, and of course, you never really know what exactly is going on, but there are some cities in Ukraine where there is a lot more actual urban combat going on, where there is real destruction of property. And Mariupol is, I think, how you pronounce the city, which is actually like the kind of the stronghold of that, neo-Nazi brigade, the Azov brigade or whatever.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So they're there, and they're embedded in the populace there, and I think the fighting is getting really, really nasty there, and that's where the Chechens are too, by the way, and the Chechens are, they want to get all those fighters, and I think they really legitimately want to round all those guys up and kill them. I mean, I think they do legitimately want to do that, and that city probably will be leveled in the way of doing it, but that's not in the north. So
yeah, and if you have all these Nazi-like brigades that are running around the Ukraine, and then you've got the unlawful combatants that are coming in there taking pot shots at Russian soldiers. Well, what are the Russian soldiers going to do? They're going to shoot back, and these things can spin out of control so easily.
Yeah, and this is why people, this is when your military is met by an overwhelming military force, especially caught off guard as they seem to be, and unless you think that they're coming in to kill everybody, or to destroy everything, then it doesn't make sense to put up this fight to the last man, last stand. Basically, everything of great value, and there's tons in Ukraine of great value. The the more those pitched battles occur, the more it's going to be destroyed. Instead of it just being, just like the coup in 2014. Just swept new people in charge, new corrupt people in charge, but basically everything kept standing. All the infrastructure was still there. That's what would happen this time. And so your average person wouldn't be worse for wear necessarily. At least the property wouldn't be. So
I will revise the prediction that I made. That I hoped, and also thought that what the Russians would do would just be clean the Ukrainian army out of the two provinces that are independent and put up a border, and that would solve it. But at this point, I guess what they're going to have to do is take all of the Eastern Ukraine and make it into a third independent country called Eastern Ukraine or something, and leave Western Ukraine alone, because East is mostly Russians.
Yeah.
So
we didn't settle on the terms of our gentleman's bet for an ounce of silver, but I'm pretty sure either way I win on this one.
Well, it is going on longer than I thought, so I think at this point I'm going to owe you some silver.
All right. Okay, let's see. Next question. Longtime gold and miner holder. He says, I rode the last ride all the way up, like 10x, but then also all the way down, because I still believed the worthless dollar thesis was not complete. Now that it seems we may be coming to another bull market ride up, how do you decide when and how much to sell versus holding and risking another crash like we experienced in 2010?
That is a $64 question. Listen, we all have all of us that can kind of see the long-term trend tend to want to hold these things forever. Now, holding gold is one thing. Holding mining stocks is something else entirely, because mining is basically the worst business in the world. So when they go up a lot, and when your neighbors are starting to buy gold mining stocks, and you hear about it on MSNBC, or who's that goofball that yells and screams while he
Jim
talks?
Cramer.
Yeah, exactly.
If
When he
Jim Cramer
starts
says buy.
exactly, then it's time to unload because everybody knows about it. But right now, nobody owns gold stocks. I mean, nobody I know, frankly, well, a few people, uh, insiders own them, but frankly, the general public or fund managers or pension, but none of these people own any gold stocks at all. They're still very cheap, relatively speaking. Don't worry about it. Worry about it when Chuck Kramer or whoever he is starts.
Jim Cramer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there'll be something else cheap and you can dump the gold stocks. I'll be so happy to get rid of those hot potatoes because they basically are and buy something intelligent. But I don't know when that's going to be. But I'm looking for, unfortunately, Slime Magazine doesn't have the power that it once did. But I've always said, you'll know when the final top has come when Slime or Newspeak have a picture of a golden bear tearing apart the New York Stock Exchange. That will be your final sell signal.
Right. Right. Okay. Let's see. Next question. It says, it seems that the only way to avoid being a whipped dog is to become exceedingly wealthy or to abandon civil society altogether. Is it possible for the average man who is responsible for feeding a family to be anything other than a whipped dog?
It's really a problem. I mean, look, in the past, I've mentioned, that those words from Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago, where, you know, they knew that the NKVD was walking up the stairs to get them, and they didn't take a pipe or a hammer to attack them, and they wished they did. So, Solzhenitsyn recognized that he and his neighbors were all whip dogs. So where do you draw the line? Because on the other hand, if you almost can't fight the state, because if you take out the group that's attacking you, they've got radios and they'll bring in 10 times as many soldiers. And it's really a problem. Once the bad guys have control of the apparatus of the state, you're really in trouble because the average person believes in the state and thinks the state is generally good. So how do you avoid being a whipped dog? Well, I treat representatives of the state personally with the respect that they deserve, whether I'm going through customs or anything, which is no respect at all, basically, but just enough to keep myself from being severely inconvenienced at the time. You try to deny the state revenue whenever you possibly can. You talk about it with your friends and neighbors because you shouldn't have any friends anyway that believe in the state. That's all you can do. It's kind of like guerrilla warfare. It's all you can do. And what do you think?
Well, I mean, he says the only way to avoid it is to become exceedingly wealthy. Now, if it's true that if you assume that you can avoid it by having exceedingly wealth, you have to ask, well, why is that being wealthy that would allow you to avoid it? And I think it allows you to avoid it because the utility of money allows you to bypass dependency on the system. That's all it is. So I think there are ways to bypass dependency on the system without necessarily being wealthy. I mean, you can choose to live your life in a way where you are less like, for instance, anybody who receives any sort of transfer payments, whether they be Social Security or Medicaid or any of that, it's impossible for you not to be whipped dog. I mean, you're on the dole. To stay on the dole, they're going to create certain structures you have to follow, and you're just trapped. So, you don't have to be exceedingly wealthy though to not be on the dole. Like you don't have to be exceedingly wealthy for that. If you need the systems like I mean, I think one of the things that's kind of getting a renaissance now is the idea of producing your own food, whether it be a garden or whatever, but like producing some of your own food. I think the more you can be less reliant on these centralized systems, which are all within the regulatory control of the state, the more independent you can be. But when they can start to control, for instance, whether or not you have permission to enter a grocery store, or whether or not on your, you have the central bank digital currency allows you to buy the things at the grocery store you want to buy, then it's impossible to not be whipped dog. But parallel systems, like just decreasing your dependency, which might remove you from civil society, I suppose. But if civil society requires you to be whipped dog, I think you should get out of it as much as you can.
I agree. And it is helpful living in a backward country with a not very powerful government like this one. It's helpful. I mean, last night, I guess you can do this everywhere now. We walked into an upmarket beanery and nobody even thought about wearing a mask, although the waiters still had them on. That was disturbing. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So next question. I'm seeing lots of deep nihilism among young folks, teens to people in their 20s. Any advice on how to help reverse this trend?
Well, nihilism. That's basically a belief in nothing. The fact that life is pointless and what are we doing here? And and I'm sympathetic to nihilism because when you look at the size of the universe and our place in it and so forth, this is why people go to religion. It gives them something to believe in. I mean, most of the time it's completely ridiculous, but something's better than nothing, I guess. And that's what nihilism is, it's a belief in nothing. But it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but you can be an intelligent nihilist, a recognition that, it probably all is for naught. And probably nothing happens after you die. But I don't know. I mean, so don't be too disturbed about the fact that kids are nihilists. Maybe they've thought about these things and maybe it's just a stage they have gone through. And I'm not anti-nihilist. Actually, it's an intellectual view that has a basis in reality. But at the same time, it is good to believe in something and to have some values that you hold to and direct your life according to.
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the big problems with the sort of nihilistic state that I think a lot of people are in right now is that it makes it impossible to make much progress simply because people don't believe, they don't believe in anything. And part of not believing in anything is they don't believe in the future. They do not believe that there's anything that'll be better later, that there's anything within their control to make things better. And so when you stop believing in the future, you stop planning for the future. You start living for today. You start taking on more debt. You start making decisions that compromise your character, your integrity, and then that causes more undermining because now you can't even believe in yourself or in values that you think are important anymore because you've compromised those. So it's dangerous, I think, nihilism, and it ultimately leads to I use this with you. I read this quote from somebody before. I said, and this isn't a good definition of nihilism exactly, but this is how it manifests in the world: is when destruction feels like progress. When you see the people tearing down statues and they feel like that's better.
I understand, and very well said on your part too. So that let me kind of rephrase that. It's that nihilism is an intellectual exercise that has to be dealt with and understood, but you shouldn't live like a nihilist, quite frankly.
No, you have to see it's there, but you have to choose the other something else, and you have to make up. You have to decide. And the hardest part is that it isn't spoon-fed to you what that thing is to believe in, and so you have to decide on it for yourself. And people want it to be given to them. They want somebody just to say, "Tell me that this is the thing that matters. Tell me that it's." This is why people are so subject to the propaganda and manipulation that we see, because they go, what matters is that Putin is a bad guy. What matters is Black lives. What matters is keeping everybody safe and getting double jabbed. And so because people have nothing there, they're waiting, and there's just an empty spot that just gets filled with whatever gets sent to you, but it has no power. It can't last, and unless you choose it intentionally on your own.
Well, look at Look at one of my favorite characters of current literature, who happens to be Rick Suarez. And Rick is a nihilist, but he's A, good humored, and B, he's constructive. He does all kinds of science things. So you've got to understand what nihilism is all about, but don't go crazy with it, because Rick would just be sitting curled up in a ball in the corner instead of having adventures in the universe.
Exactly. Exactly. See, I think he believes in the future, even though he doesn't believe it matters. You know?
Yeah, 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 exactly. And anyway, whether you believe in it or not, it's going to exist and it's going to be there. So, hey,
So make it as good as you can make it.
that's right. Deal with it, as I say.
Exactly. Exactly. And this is a big problem for people, but yeah, you have to choose. Okay. Let's see. Hi, Doug. I'm thinking about my pension right now. I'm currently worried about the purchasing power I'll have if I ever get to collect it. He says, when I ever get to collect it. I'm considering stopping and cashing out entirely and instead putting everything in physical gold and silver bullion. I'm still 20 to 25 years from retirement age, if that matters.
What to do? What to do? Well, I don't know what your pension is invested in, but if it's possible, you ought to have a self-directed pension plan. And, one thing that I've been able to do in my pension plan which is self-directed, is own real estate in foreign countries. So it's not directly under the control of my own government, which is the most dangerous adversary I have, much more dangerous than the Russian or Chinese governments, the US government, certainly to me in particular, I hate it is. So I'd say that's a tactical way to approach it. Do a self-directed thing, because he's quite correct being worried, because everybody that had a pension in Argentina 10 years ago found that the government just merged it into a national system, which is basically stealing it and throwing them a few centavos in exchange. So that can happen in the US, sure.
Yeah, and there are self-directed pension systems where you can own, as you said, foreign real estate. You can own domestic real estate. You can own precious metals. I mean, you can own real, physical, tangible things, not just securities. So, if you can do those, and it's not as easy for them to flip a switch and convert all of your equity holdings into treasuries or something.
Yes, which I think is in the cards sometime in the future.
Yeah. Okay. With the average price of gas in the U.S. being about $4 per gallon right now, what do you think? We can begin to see if the average price shoots up to $8 to $10 per gallon, especially from a socioeconomic point of view?
Jesus, what's going to happen to those people with long commutes? What's going to happen to the fact that the average guy, they say, lives over 50% of the country, with the workers, live from paycheck to paycheck. And now if it costs $200 to fill your pick 'em up truck with, I don't know. This is a time bomb.
It is a time bomb. Do you think it's possible we could see $8 to $10 per gallon gasoline in this year? Is that possible?
Well, let's look at the fundamentals as best we can. The government currently is, making it very hard to drill in new places. It's hard regulatory wise, and number one. Number two, all the domestic oil companies in the US are trying to get out of the oil business. All the big ones like BP and Shell and Exxon, all of them, their boards of directors have been thoroughly infiltrated with ESG and woke types. And the pension funds control them by saying, we're going to sell your stock, and your stock options will be worth nothing if we sell your stock. So yeah, I'm not very optimistic about that. However, I do think that small oil companies will probably do okay in this environment. Not the big ones at this point, but at some point it'll be like the tobacco companies, where tobacco became, what they were the best thing to hold once the bottom was reached, with tobacco being the great enemy. So I don't
It's
know,
a
but
pop.
the thing is that a lot of drilling and production and fracking and all this type of thing, it's slowed down or it's ended. And the guys that were doing it have had to go off and find other ways to earn a living. And the machinery, a lot of it's been mothballed, and it's got to be, you can't just like turn a switch and 15 minutes later you get all the oil that you used to have back. It doesn't quite work that way.
No, and now, I mean, all the major banks, like they're not interested in financing these projects at this point because it just screws up their ESG stuff also.
Yeah,
So the capital is
yeah,
not really available in the same way it was during the kind of heyday, in the last decade.
that's right. And the average investor has been so uh, hoodwinked by all this that he doesn't want to finance these things the way he once did. And of course, that's why figure that I've mentioned before, but it's worthwhile mentioning again. During the top of the oil boom, which happened to be 1980, 30% of the S&P 500 market value was oil and oil-related stocks. Now it's 3.5%.
It's amazing.
So
There will be some mean reversion.
there is. The only reason I can think of that gasoline is not going to $8 to $10 is because people are going to cut back driving a lot. So demand will fall quite a bit.
Okay. All right. Next question. It says a 40-year-old guy says he's a father of two. He lives in Greece. He says, we used to live happily until about 2010, but now we're a poor country with a problematic neighbor, Turkey. Says, I try to work hard and invest in gold, 25% real estate, stocks, and cryptos. I don't want to leave my country. But does Doug have any advice for me?
Hmm. Sounds like he's allocating his financial resources intelligently.
Mhm.
I'd only mention that you probably want to live out in the countryside as opposed to in a major city. Number one, have a little bit of land, grow your own food. I think that's just smart. It might even be fun to do that. So do that. But if you don't want to leave Greece, that's probably the best thing you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. Seems like it. Okay. Let's see. Next question. Has Doug ever done psychedelics such as mushrooms, and would you consider doing it? And if so, what was your experience from a personal development or growth perspective?
Hmm. Well, I'm all for these things. And obviously, the questioner has not read Drug Lord, which some say is the best of the three novels we've
It's my
put
favorite.
out so far. We deal with that type of thing. And the last psychedelic experience I had, I should have, could have, would have done ayahuasca at Jeff Berwick's in Acapulco, where that's a featured thing every year because, of course, ayahuasca is a kind of a Mexican-oriented drug, and everybody loves it. But I didn't want to take a day off because it's a 24-hour exercise to go through it, man.
At least.
Yeah, so I should have, would have, but I didn't. Well, if I go back to Acapulco again, I will take a day off to do that. But the last thing I've done were Amida muscara mushrooms. Those are the ones that you see in fairy tales. They're red with little white spots.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they grow in Colorado, and we found a pod of them. And I don't know. I wasn't crazy about them. We kind of they made my wife and I kind of sick when we had enough to get a little bit of an experience. So that's the last thing that I've done. But haven't done pot for years, even though you can buy all kinds of pot anywhere in the U.S. at this point. I mean,
Yeah.
highly refined, not just shit that you pick up from some guy on the street. So look, I guess my attitude towards drugs is that all four of these psychedelics, especially in small amounts, it's well known scientifically at this point that LSD in very small amounts improve your reflexes, clarify your mind. Lots of advantages to these things. And research has been closed down There are hundreds of things like that that have been spelled out in, what's his name, Smulyan. He's got a couple of books, that those two thick books going through all kinds of things besides LSD and the effects they have. So this stuff all ought to be legal. I'm all for it, but moderation in all things, and that's my attitude.
Yeah,
anyway,
people can get yeah, read Drug Lord. It covers it well.
Yeah, because we come up, John and I came up with a drug there that, instead of clouding the mind, which many drugs do, clarifies the mind and drops the scales from one's eyes, which is, of course, why the government goes hog wild trying to illegalize it.
Exactly. Okay, next question. Do you guys think there will be a World War III with US involved? And if so, will they use it to attack the free states in US where most freedom-loving people are and moved in the last couple of years? We're still in California, but planning to move to Texas. Is it a good idea in these times?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea because, California is going to be an epicenter of an upset. Although it must be said that some of the counties in, northern and eastern California are not at all like San Francisco suburbs. Yep. But yeah, I think it's a good thing to get out of California, get away from the high taxes, get away from the high regulations, get away from the crazy people, and get away from the high cost of living. Replace your current house with something that costs half as much, but it's nicer.
Okay. Let's see. Does Doug see an investment opportunity in buying a couple of cases of Russian branded liquor? If there is any long-term sanctions on Russian branded liquor, coupled with price controls in America resulting in lower quality liquor produced in the future in America, could this manifest some mystique around the Russian branded liquor in the future? Similar to Cuban cigars, they say.
Yeah, well, I love Cuban cigars, although I have friends that are also aficionados that think that the best cigars in the world are from Nicaragua for a number of reasons. But what do they have in Russia when it comes to liquor? Basically, vodka. But frankly, it's basically pure grain alcohol. So I'm not sure there's a lot of difference between one vodka and another. I mean, not a connoisseur. I drink bourbon mostly. But if I was going to buy a fine vodka, I'm not sure I'd go for an industrial quality Russian vodka. Maybe I'd go for a Finnish or a Polish vodka, which is, made with more care and elegance. Yeah. So I don't think that's a good speculation, frankly. Anyway, I drink bourbon mostly.
Okay. Let's see. What are your thoughts on Japan when it comes to how they dealt with the past COVID hysteria? It seems like the government did not and continues to not overreach. Their people have been mostly left alone. At least that's how it appears to me.
It appears that way to me too. But you don't hear much about Japan, do you?
Mm-mm. Nope, I don't know anything about it, to be honest.
It's a scam. I'll say it again. Scamdemic.
Yeah. Of course, that could have been what got our last video removed from YouTube.
Gracious. Cross that out. I mean,
we did say it. It was a typo.
Didn't mean to say it.
Yeah, what's funny is that because our video was taken down for misinformation, but the theme of the video was the DHS's letter on misinformation. So it's just
it really is Orwellian.
Yeah.
It really is.
Okay, let's just do a couple more questions here. Let's see. Seems if this was a war, Russia would sanction by cutting off the flow of gas. What are your thoughts on possible coordination collusion between Putin and Biden on the sanctions for show while achieving joint World Economic Forum goals?
God, I don't know. You're dealing with sociopaths with abnormal psychologies. I guess anything possible.
But it is weird though that there is some point where presumably Russia gets pushed back in a corner to such an extent that turning off the gas makes way more, like, as far as an escalation thing, turning that off makes more sense than them using a tactical nuke or something. So you think that that's between where they are and using tactical nukes, cutting off the gas has to be on that spectrum of retaliation, you would think. And you wonder what would happen to the order of things if they just did, if they basically reciprocated the economic sanctions that are being, used against them now.
Yes. Well, anything's possible, isn't it? Yes. I'm sure that I'm sure the people in the Pentagon are wargaming all of these things to see what's most likely.
Okay.
It's too bad this is also totally unnecessary. It's a meaningless little border war between a couple of countries that's just all so crazy.
Which is, but see, this is to me though. This is why I know I'm more conspiracy minded than you are, and so, but this is why I don't think it's the overreaction by almost universally by the powers that be is so damaging to everything rational, to everything that would seem like it's in people's best interest. It's just like the COVID hysteria was. I mean, it's coordinated, it's global. You have the cat, show people, that have the Olympics involved with it. You've got every, financial institution in the world and every government, and they're all at the same time.
You're right. And of course, the next big thing on the runway is global warming, even though there's every indication now we're actually
the opposite.
Cooling.
Makes sense.
They're all coordinated on all these things, though. It's quite amazing, actually.
Right. So, anyway, I think of Great Reset Phase 1 was about controlling the movement of people, changing people's expectations about their freedom of movement, and then instituting systems of control. And Phase 2 seems like it's controlling the flow of money, and instituting new systems for the control of the flow of money. But
but even if the truckers overthrow the U.S. government peaceably. Don't want the violent overthrow of the U.S. government, of course. I think that'd be illegal. But even if they do, it'll be just like after the French Revolution. Good thing they got rid of Louis XIV, except then it got worse because they had a new government that was even more insane.
That's right. That's right. Okay, let's see. Moving forward, some financial guys believe there will be an abundant life for everyone once the cabal reign of tyranny has been crushed. Will humanity get there? But that's something that Berwick talks about. Like, on the other side of this period of difficulty, there's something good.
Yeah, well, maybe, but I'm of the opinion we live on the planet of the crazy chimpanzees, and just because we get rid of one regime, it'll be replaced with another. It's a question of the psychology of humans as a species. It makes me rather pessimistic. If we were all like Mr. Spock, or at least Captain Kirk, yeah, okay. But we're not. And the worst people are the ones that go for leadership positions and take control. So I'd like to know how we solve that problem.
Yeah. Doug, this person saw you on an interview on Wall Street Silver a few weeks ago, and their question is, what makes you so sure that China is facing a major economic collapse?
Well, in brief, listen, I really laud the tremendous improvement in China. That country is totally and almost unrecognizably transformed from what it was in 1980 before Deng Xiaoping took over. So kudos to the Chinese. I mean, it's brilliant. That's the bright side. On the other hand, it's a very politically directed system. And I think that most of the banks in China are bankrupt, financing all kinds of things which might have been politically productive, along with many things that are economically productive. So I think the banks in China may be in trouble, and financing the Belt and Road Initiative, which I'm not sure that's going to work out. I think that's going to work out like the way most government economic programs work out, which is going to be with massive bankruptcies and unhappy people in the third world countries where it's going. So that's my argument. But I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow morning. I'm just saying that although the 21st century is probably the Chinese century, the Chinese are going to experience a few bumps along the way, not to mention if they do something stupid like invade Taiwan. And
Right.
it would be
Well,
stupid.
there's even those just a single data point about the cost of the average home in China. It's it's like as a percentage of their income, annual income, it's much more expensive. The home prices in China are grossly inflated. I can't remember exactly the numbers, but it's something like 30 times the cost of a home in the U.S. or something out totally unbelievably outrageous
Yeah,
like
relative to
that.
incomes. And
Yeah.
the reason for that is you can either gamble in the Chinese stock markets or you put your money in real estate, which is to say buy an apartment. So all this capital that people are saving, which is wonderful, is being misallocated into these apartments, which are really expensive now. So, yeah, China's going to have some rough running in the future, I think, for that reason too. Good point.
Okay, so let's just a couple more questions. Doug, what do you think about investing in luxury watches like Rolex, things like that?
Look, I don't understand it. I wear a like $35 digital watch. I really don't care. I mean, I just don't understand it. And I don't do things, I try not to do things that I don't understand. I mean, watches, like there are mechanical watches, I guess, but I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't buy a bunch of expensive watches. Well, what's the point? To show how much money you have, or, or, or I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's going to be a time where that sort of display of wealth is going to be very dangerous, actually, and I don't think that time is far around the corner
Yeah, some of these watches cost 50 or $100,000 or more.
or more.
I don't get it. I
Yeah,
guess that's I guess that's nature's way of telling you you have too much money.
yeah, exactly. Um, Doug, how do you manage questions around the meaning of life? Like, how do you think about the meaning of life at this stage for you?
I think it's probably, in a way, and I speak as somebody who's explored nihilism, as we talked earlier, it's probably the only important thing that you really can think about. I mean, all the stuff about, money and politics and the rest of it, it's just a diversion. I mean, you've got the only important, well, there are a lot of important, but perhaps the most important, or certainly the ultimate question of life is what happens after you die. And I've asked uh, people who are old in the past. I try to remember to do this if I think their opinions are worth anything. What do you think happens after you die? And, uh, you know, perhaps the best answer, or who I expected the best answer from, was my friend Bob Shapiro. Uh, and Bob was a long, interesting story about his whole life. But among other things, he was Alan Watts' best friend
Oh
before
yeah, yeah.
he died. And of course, Watts was the
The
guru,
Zen Buddhist guru. Yeah.
the whole thing. I mean, he was very smart and he knew everything about this whole dealing with this question we just asked. So I asked Bob, so what was Watts like? And because I didn't meet Watts, uh, although I went to the 10th anniversary dinner of his death in San Francisco, but I never got to meet him personally. Anyway, so I said, so did Watts figure it out? And he said, no, he didn't. He drank too much. He smoked too much. He had the same problems everybody else has. So no, he didn't. And I asked Bob, well, what do you think happens after you cook the bucket? And he said, well, I think I'm just kind of meld into the cosmic consciousness. So he didn't say he's going to cease to exist. Meld into, well, okay. Who the hell knows?
Do you,
Nobody
do you,
knows.
do you think the answer though to what is the meaning of life is dependent upon having any idea about what happens after death? I mean, does the meaning of life have to even be related to what happens after you die?
Well, I think it is certainly related. I think very related because look, if you're a Christian, uh, and I'm not sure anybody is a Christian these days when it comes to actually believing the theology and the dogma, quite frankly. I mean, they know some stories from the Bible and never think about it, frankly. But if you're a Christian, you're going to go to heaven for eternity, or you're going to go to hell for eternity. Is it going to be a hell like in Dante's Inferno? What's heaven like? I mean, okay, think that out. How logical is that? Or maybe, as a lot of Oriental religions believe, and I think makes more sense, you're reincarnated. And maybe if you're reincarnated, what happens has to do with the way you live this life, or the way you are when you die. I don't know. I don't have evidence. Everybody's got experiences. I mean, I have experiences too on this type of thing. But do they prove anything? I don't know, because the mind is infinitely capable of tricking itself. So I don't know. Meaning of life. I know what. Watch Monty Python's movie by that name. It's a brilliant movie.
It's a brilliant movie.
As close to an answer as we can come up with, at least without sitting down for a late evening with cigars and alcoholic libations.
But I just don't understand. I'm sorry to keep pushing this, because I don't understand why the meaning of living, meaning of life, necessarily is coupled with the meaning of post living. It's like
you're no, as opposed to what happens after you shed this mortal coil.
Yeah, I mean, whatever time I've got here, if the only way I get meaning here for whatever period of time I have here depends upon what happens when I'm not here, then that would seem like that would make it.
Listen, that's you're no arguments from me. I mean, look, Ayn Rand was a dogmatic atheist that believed that when you're dead, you're dead. But she wrote a book called We the Living. So life is for the living, and there's a life-centered philosophy. No, I'm not arguing. In fact, I don't argue with anybody, even if
I know you don't.
The most bizarre religious beliefs. I like to listen to them. I find it entertaining, and since I can't disprove anything, it's really interesting. Tell me more. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either.
I wish I did know, but I don't know anybody that does know. If somebody does know, I really would like to be introduced to them. I'd love to talk to them.
Yeah, but the thing is that you have to have. I don't think that the answer to that question is not knowable. And I think at least I don't think it is. So I accept that it's not knowable. And then it's like, okay, now what? Now what? So that question's not knowable. I can't know what happens after I die. I could have certain ideas or notions about it, but I'm still confronted with the fact that in my life, between now and whenever it ends, I need to find something, meaning somewhere, so I don't fall down the nihilism trap. So I have to find a reason for life, a meaning for my life. And
you have to assign some type of meaning to it.
You must.
That's right. You have to make something actually important. Some people, the meaning of life for them is their family. That's
understandable. Yep, it's something. Yep.
Yeah, it's all kinds of things. I mean, they give money, basically throw money away into philanthropic black holes. That gives them a purpose for living. Mm-hmm. I mean, whatever gets you through the night, as Frank said.
I think that might be the answer. Yeah, I think so. All right.
Or like, that's my commodity broker. There must be something that's really good that I'm probably on the wrong side of.
Okay, well,
urgently, but I can go. It can wait. But you can also bring up what Mike Tyson says. Hey, everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the mouth.
Exactly. Exactly.
Who knows?
Oh man, I love it. All right, well, I'm gonna let you go, Doug, so you can get to that. Make sure you're not getting a margin call on some sideways trade or something.
I never put myself in a position where I even could get a margin call. Although in today's world, anything can happen. But he's got something interesting to say to me, so I'll talk to him.
All right. Well, we'll let it go from here then, and we'll catch up on Monday again. Thanks a lot, Doug.
Super, Matt.